Coming off the biggest comeback in school history, 41-38 victory over Maryland, Rutgers doesn't limp into bowl play. They sprint into postseason play, taking on North Carolina in the Quick Lane Bowl coming up on December 26th. We bring in Kevin Recio, our Rutgers contact with On the Banks at SB Nation. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So let's steal that momentum and carry it into bowl season with that tremendous comeback. Down big, I believe 35-10 at one point in that game against the Terps. I think it's extra special, and you'll have to fill me in on this, in regards to entering a major conference like the Big Ten with another program, probably few ties between those programs entering this league, but suddenly you're kind of joined at the hip. There will always be that connection between Rutgers and Maryland, and to get that first win in very dramatic fashion in the head-to-head competition that could be the final game of the season. It looks like the Big Ten wants to square those two programs off annually. To get that win in dramatic fashion, not limp into bowl play at 2-6, you would have still been eligible, but now a 7-5 team with that win over the Terps.
It's shocking. Shocking, definitely. I remember watching that game, down 35-10. Difficult to watch. It looked like another blowout loss for Kyle Flood. Throughout the season, definitely had trouble against some of the better teams in the Big Ten. And it would have been nice to go into bowl season with some momentum and maybe even be able to get 8 wins in the first Big Ten season. And lo and behold, they were able to do it. A key roughing the kicker penalty on the punter in that game really changed the tide, really changed and swung things around for Rutgers. And they were able to, on the back of Gary Nova, to engineer quite the comeback, the biggest comeback in school history. So definitely, I think, rising above expectations. I remember before the season even started, very few people even thought Rutgers would even get to a bowl game. So even at 6 wins before the Maryland game started, things were okay. No one was really expecting a win. The line at the beginning was Maryland by 9 points. So it would be okay if Rutgers lost that game at 6-6. They still would have, I think, measured up to or even exceeded expectations. But to get 7 wins and to be able to get an 8th, definitely a big surprise, a welcome surprise for the team.
I have to admit, Kevin, I saw the line at 9. I thought it was fair. I even thought the Terps would exceed that line, and at 35-10, I thought I was pretty smart. And I think it all came down to comparing those scores against the better teams in the Big Ten, where pretty much both schools had gotten blown out. Maryland had fared a little bit better against the heavyweights in the Big Ten, and it was difficult to see them not winning at home on the final day of the season. But again, down 35-10, Gary Nova with definitely one of his better moments, maybe not his best, but better moments in his up and down career. So let's start there with Gary Nova. And when you shake out the numbers, he finished 3rd in the Big Ten in passing yards, 3rd in touchdowns. Who knows what you're going to get against North Carolina, but I will let you take on the Gary Nova narrative, because that's been the narrative of this program for his 3 or 4 seasons.
It's the Ralph Friedgen effect. I think it's very apparent. Before the season started, when the Fridge came on board, everyone knew of his history with quarterbacks and offenses, and it definitely made an effect this year. It's been a roller coaster, but there's no question that it's his best year by far compared to his last 3 years. Definitely struggled against the better teams. I don't think a lot of people expected much out of him, even against a team like Michigan or Maryland, but he stepped up big. He showed that senior resolve. He even won the team MVP trophy at the team banquet, which was, I think, well-deserved. I think he'll go down as sort of a polarizing figure. Maybe some missed chances that could have been better through quarterback play, but he is the leader, the career leader in touchdowns thrown for Rutgers. He's close. He's also high up there in interceptions as well, but I think his legacy will be a positive one when all is said and done.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride with him. Rutgers has been a mainstay in postseason play, something that had not been accomplished previously. There are more opportunities these days, obviously, with more bowl games still. Winning record, and that's not even close to 500. He has certainly led this program through the good times and the bad times, but there have been more good than bad. The running back situation, you lose your best running back in game 2 or 3, then you lose another one here in the last few weeks. You've had a couple freshmen carry you in Robert Martin, Josh Hicks. You look to be in decent shape, and it's almost maybe a good thing going into 2015 that these freshmen have had to step up and carry the load.
Definitely. So for the bowl game, we seem to be in good hands. Those two true freshmen, Josh Hicks, Robert Martin, they seem to be able to play at the next level, and they're only freshmen, so only time will tell. 2015, it's very interesting. I would assume that you have to give it to Paul James no matter what. Even if Robert Martin or Josh Hicks has an amazing game against North Carolina in the Quick Lane Bowl, the history that you have with Paul James, it's undeniable. And he's a special talent, I think. I'm not sure if we have that yet with Robert Martin or Josh Hicks. Paul James is that. And he'll have veteran leadership. I think you want that in someone who's going to return to your starting lineup. But it's definitely going to be crowded. Not only do you have Paul James coming back from injury, hopefully. You have Desmond Peoples will graduate. Then you have Justin Goodwin, who spent time at cornerback for a couple games in the beginning, but then moved back to running back. Then you have the two true freshmen, and then Savon Huggins, who entered a medical redshirt for this year, will be coming back as well. So definitely crowded. I hope it's a good problem to have, but it'll be a struggle to find playing time for all those backs.
Kevin, you mentioned special talent. That's a nice segue to Leonte Carroo, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns receiving. But in that final game, in the big comeback, a couple other wide receivers step up with huge games, over 100 yards receiving out of them. So this North Carolina defense that has been shredded on a regular basis will not be able just to focus on him. Of course, he's the guy that you need to take away in the passing game, but it's good to see for the Scarlet Knights that you have other options in the passing game.
Exactly right. In the comeback against Maryland, 3 100-yard games for 3 receivers: Leonte Carroo, Janarian Grant, and Andre Patton. It's a good sign because if you look at the numbers, Leonte Carroo, over 1,000 yards, great season. That's more yards than the next 3 wide receivers combined, and that includes tight end Tyler Croft. So you want to see someone step up in preparation for next year. There's a big chance that he'll jump to the NFL if he gets a good grade from the NFL Draft Advisory Board. So with Gary Nova leaving and the possibility of Leonte Carroo leaving, who have been playing together since the high school days, you're going to have a new quarterback and you're going to have some unknowns at wide receiver. You want to see someone like a Janarian Grant or John Simis or Andre Patton to step up and be able to take the reins from Leonte Carroo.
So you've got all this offense and a historically bad North Carolina defense. Bad meaning horrific, 119th points given up this season, 70 against East Carolina, 50 several times. Really, I'm going through the game logs and I'm searching for positive plays and positive performances out of this Tar Heel defense. Basically, the best defensive effort by far was giving up just 20 in a rout against Duke, a pretty good football team. Other than that, they did defeat Georgia Tech, but it was 48-43. They're going to give up points. It got so bad that their associate head coach, Vic Koenig, has left the program without a defensive coordinator for this game. So someone else will step into those shoes. But it's a game that Kyle Flood has to be salivating a bit. There has to be talent on that North Carolina defense because they recruit well. I just think a lot of blown coverages, blown tackles, and it's there for the taking on the offensive side. Before we get to the other side of the football, you have to feel good about this matchup.
Well, it's funny that you mention that because as you look at North Carolina and the struggles on defense, as a Rutgers fan, I know how that feels. That one year in the American Athletic Conference, a historically bad defense for Rutgers, the most passing yards given up. And it wasn't even really a strong conference, other than UCF and Teddy Bridgewater at Louisville. Things weren't a lot better this year for Rutgers either. Blown out against Michigan State, Ohio State. So a Rutgers fan will know how UNC feels. It looks to be like a shootout in Detroit. I think it'll be similar to the Maryland game. Maryland didn't have a really great defense either. But both Rutgers and Maryland did have pretty decent offenses. The key was it came down to one team making a defensive stop, and in the end, that was Rutgers. We'll see. I think Gary Nova against struggling defenses, he does very well. He doesn't throw picks, he throws touchdowns, and he finds his receivers open. North Carolina is that kind of team. I think Ralph Friedgen and Kyle Flood will be able to move the chains against the Tar Heels.
So we go to the other side of the ball, and you mentioned the struggling defense in the last couple of years with the Scarlet Knights. Marquise Williams, one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the country, 20 touchdowns, 9 picks. He runs it all over the place, 12 rushing touchdowns. They don't have much of a rushing attack, but they have a dynamic receiver in sophomore Ryan Switzer. We talked about him before we came on. He caught 55 passes. So they do score, and they score against just about everybody. If Rutgers is to put up a decent defensive effort, which I would guess if they can limit North Carolina in the low 30s, something in that range, not that they couldn't win a 45-42 game, but that they would probably feel really good in that 31 to 35 range defensively. Who are those guys for Rutgers that we will be looking for?
Well, definitely all along the defensive line. You have a rising star in redshirt freshman Kamoko Toure. Led the team with 7.5 sacks. And then you have the captain of the defense, Darius Hamilton, who just announced he's coming back to Rutgers, thankfully, for his senior season. Led the team in tackles for loss. It's stopping them and containing Marquise Williams. You mentioned that they don't have much of a rushing attack, and they don't really. But the leading rusher is Marquise Williams with over 700 rushing yards. That kind of quarterback, that sort of dual threat, has given Rutgers defense fits since the Schiano days, really. I think back to Pat White at West Virginia, all the way back then, giving Rutgers defenses fits. In order to win, they're going to have to limit him. They can't let him run free, which is a lot easier said than done. The pass defense, ever since they've tried to sort of contain these dual threat quarterbacks, they leave the secondary wide open. It's going to be a struggle. Like you said, if they can limit them to 30 points, I feel confident that Rutgers can score more than that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where Vegas is coming up with this line. I understand that North Carolina's got the more consistent quarterback, the more dynamic quarterback. Obviously, Nova needs a pocket. He's not extremely mobile. He can move around a little bit, but he's not dynamic as a playmaker outside of the passing game. These teams seem to mirror each other to me. Rutgers did not step up against the elite teams, where North Carolina really didn't face elite teams. The best team that they faced was Georgia Tech, a really good team, top 15 team, but they didn't face a Michigan State, Ohio State. Wisconsin would be in that range of Georgia Tech. So I think Rutgers' top-end schedule was more difficult than North Carolina's, but Vegas likes the Tar Heels in this one by 3. So any thoughts about the point spread?
Yeah, no, it's hard to argue with that. You can definitely make the argument. Like you said, I think Rutgers' schedule was no question more difficult, but they didn't really step up against that schedule. They didn't really do well against the better teams in the conference. Well, as you said, North Carolina, they do have a great win against Georgia Tech. That's a great win. You can't take that away from them. Whereas Rutgers' best win right now seems to be a Maryland team that's really not that good. As great a comeback as it was, that's just not really a great win to hang your hat on. I'm wondering if maybe Vegas thinks the ACC is a better conference. I mean, you can make the argument that they have last year's national championship team. Personally, I think the ACC is by far the worst Power 5 conference, but it's a close spread anyway at 3. It's hard to argue with that, and you can make arguments for both sides.
All right, Kevin. It's Rutgers and it's North Carolina. Before I let you go, because this is interesting to me, you go to a bowl game not in a tropical site or a city that seems to be a destination during the winter. Detroit, the Quick Lane Bowl, Little Caesars Pizza Bowl, Motor City Bowl. It's been all sorts of names in the past, but it's in the middle of Big Ten country. Do you think that's a positive for this program?
I definitely think so. For maybe fans of other teams who aren't familiar with the Rutgers program, and I did Q&As with some other blogs of Big Ten programs, and a lot of them they'll say, we're not entirely familiar with the team, we're still getting to know them. So for Rutgers to be able to play in the heart of Big Ten country, I think that's great. And like I said before, the expectation at the beginning of the season, some people were expecting 4 wins, 5. To have 7 and to just be able to go bowling, I mean, sure, we would have loved a better location, but to be able to go bowling at this time in the first season of the Big Ten, it's hard to ask for more.
Well, if you love offense, you should love this game because I think it will deliver. I would be surprised if it's a 17-10 game, and if you're a bowl junkie like me and try to catch all the Power 5 matchups you possibly can, I will definitely be watching. And again, this would be a huge high note to finish with a postseason win. Again, coming off the Maryland win, because again, I think the Terps were considered substantially better, not in a huge way, but substantially, decidedly better. But Rutgers pulls off the win on the road, and I think that was huge in separating these two programs, or at least what we talked about in regards to these two being compared as they work through their first few seasons in the Big Ten. Kevin Recio joins us from SB Nation's On the Banks. Kevin, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the game. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Thanks, Mark. Merry Christmas to you as well. See you then.